Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is Old Library Update Discussion. Mr. Scott, are you introducing this?
Yeah. So our most recent direction from the council was to do what we needed to do using as little financial resources as necessary to make that old library building habitable, so we could use it for space and maybe have some access to the LeConte Stewart Library. And as we've gone through this process, we've encountered some concerns with the facade and other items that we wanted to bring to your attention, so we could get further guidance. If the guidance is to continue in the same way, I think we've offered a couple of options. But I will maybe, if it's okay, Mayor, turn the time over to GRCA to go through specifics about what the concerns might be.
Sounds great.
Okay, great. Appreciate your time again this evening. Good to see you all. So as Shane mentioned, over the last 4 or 5 months, we've been working on ironing out the details of what this space should be utilized for, and to what extent do we take the remodel progress as per the direction last time received by the council. So as we indicated in our report, we'll go ahead and start the slideshow if you want to go to the next one. So again, just a quick recap. At the council's direction, we're advised to use the most economical approach to this remodel. Out of the work sessions that we had with staff multiple times, we determined that locating the IT department in this space in conjunction with maintaining the gallery space and also creating a new museum space would be the ideal and most economical approach. We did identify in our master plan that the IT department was anticipated to grow and would also require some additional workspace, storage space to meet their needs. So again, just a brief summary, move the IT department from the City Hall, provide space for long-term storage. This would be administrative storage, secure storage that would occur at the north end of the building, again, in an effort to reduce and minimize, or I guess reduce the amount of remodel work necessary. Again, preserve the Stewart Art Gallery, protect in place with minimal alterations. Minimal alterations meaning minor electrical work and lighting upgrades to improve the gallery space. So just a brief summary of what this design work would entail. We've identified necessary interior walls and ceiling that would have to be removed for mechanical work, duct work, electrical work, so on and so forth. We've always identified, even in our master plan, minor structural repairs are required to the floor at the northwest corner that has rotted sill plates. That also needs to be addressed and would be addressed in this project. Replacement of the mechanical rooftop units, that was also identified as part of our master plan requirements. We have planned for that work, as well as replacement of the existing ductwork to allow for the maximize the use of those new units as well, and also to maintain HVAC requirements are required by code as we adjust the spaces accordingly. As obviously it's wide open right now, as we create spaces, we also have to alter that the delivery of that fresh air. Replacement of lighting and electrical as necessary to accommodate the new configured spaces in the building. And also, as I mentioned previous, in the north, I guess if you will, third, protect the existing lighting and electrical systems, again, to minimize the impact and cost for the remodel. Next slide. So to give you an update here on the floor plan, as I just described it, I guess as we're looking at this, more of a reddish tan color here on the south half, we have the Stewart Art Gallery and vault, again, as that would remain as is with minimal alterations. We've identified a space in the southeast corner that would be dedicated for museum purposes. In our findings, as we've worked through code requirements for upgrades to our spaces, we did find that we do have to rebuild the two multi-user restrooms to accommodate and allow for accessible access. The center portion here of this plan, as we create a new lobby, we also are proposing a conference room suitable for a 10 to 12 individual. This conference room would also be accessible off of the lobby, but also accessible from the staff side as well. So this would be a multi-use conference room, either for use by staff or by the citizenry or by museum participants, so on and so forth. The remainder of the north half of the building would then be established for staff space and use. So again, as we mentioned, the IT department is being planned to be located in this space. We have various workstations as identified, also work area, build area, storage of parts, so on and so forth, creating a standalone office space, a break room, a staff toilet. So again, staff does not have to go out and use public as they visit these other museum and art gallery spaces. As I mentioned previously, the north third or quarter would be dedicated for long-term archival storage. So again, we're trying to minimize the impact to the current floor space, but also creating new spaces that are multi-function, multi-use, and also reusing as much of the current infrastructure as allowed to accommodate for this function. So where are we at cost-wise? Our current estimate as it stands, creating what we identify as the architectural elements. So again, this is everything that goes into the remodel, including mechanical, electrical, the minor structural repairs. We have included and maintained contingencies. These are for the unknown elements that once we start digging into these remodels, we eventually will find things that we need to mitigate. We've also included, maintained some inflation costs, identified the potential contractor fees. The soft costs are identified here as well, and currently we are about $660,000 is our cost. Please, if anybody has any questions, go ahead and interrupt me at your convenience. Next slide. Okay, so as Shane mentioned, we have identified some of those risks already, just by the nature of the beast, working through the process. Right now, the exterior wall is composed of the stone veneer that has been attached and adhered to the building via the wood studs here. That has been the composition of this building since its construction. And over time, water has penetrated and vapor has penetrated, air has penetrated, and has degraded that lath that has been holding this stone to the structure. Also to note that this building lacks any structural sheathing at the perimeter wall system. So part of our master plan, our original investigation by our structural engineer, this was identified as a risk in case of a seismic event. So what we have proposed, a proposed action, again, this is one thought and one idea. We could potentially explore other alternatives, but what we feel is appropriate to mitigate the structural component and also allow for reattachment and secure attachment of the building facade, again, in an effort to preserve, is to remove that facade, install proper sheathing, rebuild the facade accordingly as it originally was. This also does affects another risk that we have found, mold. As you know, as the library moved out, we did have some concealed areas. This is in the original office at the southeast corner of the building. I believe there was a file cabinet here. As that was moved out, it was discovered that there was mold there. As we asked staff to remove this drywall so we could get a better understanding of what was happening, also please note that there is no moisture barrier on the perimeter of the wall. So again, as time has gone on, vapor and air has entered into the cavity system and again has degraded and allowed for a perfect environment, if you will, as we have warm tempered air on the inside, sometimes cool moist air on the outside and vice versa. That creates the environment for mold. Also on the perimeter of the building, we have noticed in certain areas that there are larger cracks within the mortar, again, a breeding ground for moisture to penetrate the building system. So as part of addressing the structural portion and the attachment of the facade to the building by including sheathing, at the same time we would also add the weather and air barrier, which again, if it's new construction, we'd be required to include that as well. So again, that is an issue we want to mitigate. We also did find mold at the northwest corner as well. My gut instinct is that as we open up some other areas, we'll potentially find more mold, and again, we'll need to mitigate that risk. So, one of the items I brought to your attention in the presentation back in the spring and identified some cost as an option. Again, now we want to revisit this is the window system. Again, these are our original windows to the building. They do not have any thermal resistance with them, or minimal thermal resistance, I guess is the better language to use. As we work through updating the mechanical systems and providing more efficient systems, however, we're still missing a piece here of not addressing the envelope as a whole. And these windows we've identified as a major point where we're going to have a trade-off. If we increase the building systems, mechanical systems, the efficiencies, we're losing that potentially in not updating the overall fenestrations of the building. So again, this is still an option. We do want to bring it again back to the council's attention. Next slide. We have also put together some cost that would reflect these risks. So for the sheathing and the vapor barrier, again, this is removing the facade as it is. There's a couple options of putting back the original facade materials or replicating the materials in an act of preservation of the building itself. We've identified that cost to be about $469,000, just under $500,000. The seismic remediation, this is again tying in conjunction with the sheathing. We'd also be tying the truss system to the exterior wall system down into the floor system. Right now that is also absent from the building structure itself. So again, improving those seismic responsiveness to the building in an event. The additional windows actually is a little bit less than what I presented to you previously. Right now, to replace the windows, we're looking at about a $27,000 cost, just under $30,000. So in this slide and in your packet, we've put these two numbers together. What our current estimate is, as I've presented the floor plan to you and described the remodel itself, plus the potential to add the additional risk remediation, we are just running about $1.2 million. Now, again, keep in mind, this is information I'm bringing to your attention. We have not included these measures in our scope of work at this time. We felt it was our duty to make the council aware of these items so appropriate action could be taken. Next slide. So just to wrap up my update here, at a staff level, we did start exploring some potential alternatives. I have the opportunity to speak in front of plenty of councils and listen to citizen comments, and it's always wonderful to listen to those comments and feel the life that citizens have for their community and also for their historical markers, and I can truly appreciate that. Some ideas that we had floated around at a staff level and wanted to potentially either discuss further or table, however the council chooses to proceed. One of the ideas was to create more of a community-focused project. Now, we've identified in the remodel that we will be creating a space for IT, doing a minimal approach to remodeling of the building, but there's still some space in there that's really not being addressed. And one of the models that we find very successful in our work throughout other municipalities is also creation of multi-use spaces, not only for city administration, business, council, but also they can be used as a multi-purpose function for the citizens of the community. So potential to focus more again on a community-based project. And again, that would also include the conversation of the Stewart Art Gallery and the museum space that we have already started planning for in this project. So with that, there's a couple approaches here to potentially consider. One is maybe change the focus of the remodel work to not isolate a staff function. We like to try to create relationships within city departments. All too often we've noticed other municipalities where we have not segregation, but you have departments that are remote in other buildings across the city. It's always nice. It's a good exercise and promotes continuity within staff to have staff all located in one building near each other. It creates a better working environment for everyone. This is also an opportunity to give the citizens more input into the project or into the process. Part of this discussion, again, is going back to where do we go from here? Do we continue to remodel the building? Do we also look at alternatives to repurpose the space, or do we potentially look at options to tear down and reconstruct a truly community-based space that could potentially house this council and chambers, also act as a community space for receptions, similar to what I've seen this space used for over the years that we've been in front of this council and provided our services to the city. So with that in mind, I just want to briefly touch on some cost, if potential for reconstruction of a new facility would be considered. Right now we are looking about $240 a square foot to construct a building, again, that would house these the art gallery and also create the museum space, but also create again other potential flexible spaces that the city and community could both utilize. Right now what I'm showing you here in this slide is a one level space, approximately 7,000 square feet. Again, the idea that we're replacing one footprint with an equal new construction footprint, if you will. The additional cost for contractor contingency right now is running about a total of about $2 million. And again, this is a hypothetical to replace the structure. And I want to caution when we discuss replacing the building, again, there's a duty of ours to maintain the heritage. And I want to make sure that in this discussion, if the council does choose to do so, that we take great care in understanding how we can recreate or replicate the replacement of the original library building, that it's not conceived as a work of modern style architecture, but it holds the historic value that replacing the building would provide. So with that, any questions I could answer for the council?
Questions from the council? This is a little different in that we're not looking for an action, so we don't necessarily have a clarifying question before motion, but attempting to follow that similar format, and we'll open it to each of the council members for questions. Start with Councilmember Page.
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions. First of all, on the, how did you determine, I mean, have we really got into that building to see what the problems are? I mean, did we hire, for example, somebody that mitigates mold or whatever to examine underneath, on top, various walls? Like I say, and you did say this, there's a lot of assumptions here.
Correct.
A lot of times, do we really know what it costs to do something like this?
No. Again, from an estimation standpoint, there's two ways to approach it. Either you're going to assume that you're going to find it in 10 or 15% of the entire building, or you take an approach, a little more conservative approach, that maybe half the building has some issues that has to be dealt with in that manner. So to answer your original question, no, steps have not been taken to further investigate the extent of that issue. It would be advisable that if we do continue on with remodel work as we've described, that it be in the interest to understand exactly what is the full extent before, yeah. So we can come back and make an appropriate recommendation to the council. So.
Well, I appreciate that. I do know that I've actually talked to a couple of people. That's what they do for a living. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they go in and it's not as bad as they think. Other times it's a living nightmare, and it's completely out of the realm of what they anticipated, and it's just, it's kind of like the money pit. I guess that before the council could make a decision on this, I mean, this is something we need to look at, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like to go into projects making a lot of assumptions at the behest of throwing money away at it. So.
Yeah.
Councilor Snow?
Yeah, I took a look. I took a walk through the building just recently with Cole Stevens, and he pointed out to me the couple of spots that have been opened up in the walls and it's amazing how exposed that rock is, or how exposed the building really is and the walls are to the outside elements at this point. Beyond that, I mean, the seismic, in a seismic event, the building, it's my understanding, the building at this point, as it is right now, would be rubble in even a fairly minor seismic event. Is that accurate? I mean, I think there are always assumptions there, and I don't mean to put you on the spot on that.
Right.
But
I believe we identified once you get to a what is considered a moderate level of seismic activity, that building would potentially suffer great damage to it. And again, our goal in a life safety standpoint is evaluating the fine line of life safety, meaning that in an event, we want to design and take actions that allow that structure to maintain its shape and form for a certain time period to allow individuals inside adequate time to get out of the building before more severe damage or potential collapse occurs. And I just want to clarify on that, the exterior of the building, that currently right now the stone material is actually acting as the sheathing, if you will. It's taking the forces that are drawn from the roof and the floor at the same time. And as the slide indicated, and as you've seen personally, the extreme deterioration of that lath, again, if you go and push on that wall, a little more force and you could push push that stone right through. So in a seismic event, the fear or understanding that that block and stone would eventually, it would pop off with enough force, and again, the building would not have any type of diaphragm to hold itself together. So that is the concern from a life safety standpoint.
Okay. One other quick question. I know we haven't investigated the walls that encompass the LeConte Stewart Gallery to see if there is an impact on mold, but are those walls, I guess I don't know, have those walls had additional treatment over the years to preserve that room more so now, or do you suspect that those walls are similar to the other walls where we're seeing some of these problems?
I would probably have to ask Cole to give some input on this as well. He has a little bit more history with the building, but again, as you mentioned, maybe some over the years additional layers of paint or drywall replacement. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that mold isn't present in the cavity itself. I would bet that there probably is.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's made its way through the paint and the drywall is obviously should be investigated. So,
right. So I guess not even that room is necessarily preserved at this point from
no, and
potential
it
damage.
is something we've talked about at the staff level, that precautions should be made and some additional investigations. If the art gallery is going to remain as it is and where it is, all measures should be taken to ensure it's preserved.
Right.
So.
Okay. Thank you.
I just had maybe just not to oversimplify, but if I understood everything from your presentation based on your recommendation, you're looking at $1.24 million to bring it structurally up to date, and another $600 plus thousand to design the interior as we would anticipate for its best possible use or its most efficient use. So just shy of $2 million, if I'm, and then a brand new building cost is $2,086,000. Is that kind of the difference of what you're saying? Is if you want to keep the building, you're just under $2 million. If you want to raise the building and rebuild it, you're at $2.1 million. Is that?
So the third to the last page, after we include the additional cost to remediate the risks, the remediation estimate, as we currently have identified it, is just under $600,000. If you add that number, the 584,283, to the current remodel costs, again, what I mean by the current remodel cost is reflects the floor plan that I've presented. Again, that includes replacement of the HVAC systems, electrical work, finish work, the two restrooms, updating those as well. So all the items necessary to make those spaces what they will be, that cost is $660,000.
So you don't add it together? That 1.2 is the total of remediation and what was asked for before?
Okay, thank
Correct.
you. That's what I wasn't clear on. That helps.
Yeah, right now we've only, our current design reflects $660,000 from an estimating standpoint.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. Councilor Lee?
Yeah, just a question about the mold on remediation for it. Do they usually have to take out the wood, or are they able to preserve the wood between the rock and the sheetrock or plaster, whatever it is?
My understanding is it varies on the level of activity, if you will. Minor activity, I believe, wood can be treated, cleaned, preserved, and reapplied. Again, we want to control where the mold is coming from and where it's being harvested, if you will, and that generally is within the cavity or at the surface where we have cool versus warm, and that's usually, in this case, the drywall. So my fear, well, I shouldn't say my fear, but I guess what I would anticipate again is if we start removing those pieces, if the mold is at a level to where its recommendation is to replace the the wood itself, then that's something that should be considered. But we would need to provide some further investigation and input from a remediation standpoint to better understand what the steps would need to be taken and what could be preserved and what would not. So I hope that answers both the question.
Yeah. And I did walk through the building. It was open one day, and I was able to go in and look at a lot of the areas personally. And what struck me the most is how there was mold on the walls where bookshelves were and pictures were hanging. And I know that the Con Stewart pictures, I've already been told that they had found some mold on it. I don't know, did we take those pictures off the wall, Shane, do you know?
I don't.
Because I think
I've never heard that that's the case, but I don't know that.
Yeah, when they did a replica of one for the new library, they said that was the issue with it. And so that's what I was told.
Cole, maybe you could answer that. I know that we've looked in that, the only people that go in that gallery right now are staff members and some students sometimes. How much investigation have we done to the walls inside the gallery?
We've done a little bit of investigation, but not a whole lot. But that's the first I've heard of mold being attached to any one of the photos. The photos or the paintings are attached to the wall via a special tool that there's, I think Dean's the only one that has the knowledge of how to take those off the wall. So, but we have moved bookshelves in that room just to see if there's anything behind it. Nothing that we've seen, but there's also a different building material in that room with the carpeted walls that weren't necessarily on some of the other walls. But I would suspect that the art gallery is similar to what we found in the southeast corner, where there's 3 layers of sheetrock. As we cut into the wall, there's 3 layers of sheetrock, versus the north end, there was just the 1 layer of sheetrock. So it's been added to over the course of years, with just layer upon layer. So that's the first I've heard of mold on that.
Is there any way that we can check into that and make
yes,
sure?
there is, yeah.
Because I had heard that when they did that with the new library and that replica that's sitting over there.
Yeah, we reached out to some folks to gather some information on what should the proper humidity level be for that artwork, because it is very valuable artwork, and we want to make sure as we do this that we are, illustrating everything that Scott mentioned, that we're providing an environment where these things are protected, as well as that moisture moving through the walls is also eliminated. So, but yes, we can certainly look into all that.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Yarn.
So I'm not sure whether these questions are for JRC architects or just council or in general, but when we go into this, normally I'm thinking of in terms of specific data. I don't have enough data on specific things, and it makes it hard to make a decision. In this case, I'm not thinking about data so much or additional options, although I like kind of the option we don't have costs on of maybe moving the council chambers over there. The reason I like that is because I really do think, it's amazing how you do time motion studies on interactions. It's not just, continuity, but when people interact in an organization and you have this cross-organizational communication and you're there close, you tend to have important conversations that maybe you put off or put in an email and you're not as effective. So I kind of like the idea of having the city staff together in one place. But I guess the main point to me is the question that I still have, and maybe somebody has the vision for this, is what is our purpose in doing this in the first place? So in other words, if you look in doing a new building, preserving the old building, is our purpose to obviously, we've got staff considerations that we need more space for staff. And in the future, have we done, I haven't seen anything really that says, I noticed the new building would provide, if you have an unfinished basement, 14,000 square feet, whereas the current building's only 5,000 square feet. So do we have a need for more space? And one of my concerns is, until we define exactly how much space we need, other concerns too that are fundamental, and I share some of these. I was very much in favor of Heritage Park and preserving the history of a very fine community that I've been had the pleasure of being a part of for the last 30 years, raising my children here and everything. It'd be great to preserve that. So that's another objective. But what does that mean? For example, one crazy idea, I'll just throw this out. I'm not an engineer, architect, or anything else, builder. But it seems to me the distinctive characteristics of a historical building are its exterior, maybe the window, the architecture. It's a one-level sort of Rambler style on the front. It has kind of interesting windows, and the rocks are, it has a certain flavor to it. If you use that same sort of veneer on a new building, who cares about what the interior walls are? You could almost build a new building and have the veneer be the rock. We don't have any estimation on the cost there. But so I have a lot of unanswered questions, but I think the basic question we have to answer is, what are our needs? Part of these are value judgments of the community of preserving our history and how to best do that. Part of that is the museum, the LeConte Stewart Art Gallery, and where it's housed. Part of it may be the exterior look of the building. How do you preserve that and yet still have a building that's not going to collapse on all the employees who are in it when you have a seismic event and kill everyone? And you're going to have adequate space to run the city operations. So I think we first need to define what are those parameters going into the future, because I don't want to build 3 buildings. If we can build 1 building to accomplish all those purposes, it would seem to be more efficient. And I want that 1 building to last not another 15 years with Band-Aids on it, but to last another 100 years. So we don't have to rebuild it later. So it's kind of the fixed cost concept when we were doing the electrical presentation of, you need not only to look at the immediate costs, but look at the costs over time with what your needs are. I'm not sure that's been clearly defined, so I'm glad we don't have an action point decision to make at this point. But, I think it's possible that you could have a win-win-win where we address all the concerns, the valid concern for the culture of our community and preserving our history, and at the same time have a modern building on the inside that's safe, that is efficient as far as energy usage, is efficient as far as the operations of the city, and that we keep employees together. So I'd like to see a little more discussion, I guess, about what our needs are going to be the next 50 through build out 100 years as far as office space, how we want to design that, and then also address this other concern of the character of the City Hall block.
Shane, do you want to add anything to that? Or?
Well, I think JRCA, just before Councilman Garn and Councilman Adams and Councilman Page took office, did a study. I think part of your study addressed, I don't know if it was build-out needs, but it was addressed future needs as well.
Correct.
But the assumption at that point was that the old library was in a situation where it certainly could be rehab, not easily, but easier than we understand today.
Correct. As Shay mentioned, we worked on this master plan for the city for a little more than 2.5 years. Again, we're still at a draft, if you will, of that plan. That plan highlights various actions and also presents to the council and the citizens what are the anticipated staff requirements going. I believe it's a 30-year look ahead, if I remember correctly. And in majority of those staff outlooks for city administration, again, the master plan also included public works and power and other functions of the city. But for city administration in this building, in our 30-year look ahead, we have identified what staff believes that those requirements are going to be. So with that in mind, the previous direction that we received, we had indicated that the library building would remain as it is. We were not going to include any type of actions to remove it, rebuild it, so on and so forth. We did present in that draft master plan an option to create engineering, a combined engineering and building department space, and also potentially for future city attorney and prosecutor. That outlook, I understand, is probably further down the road than is pertinent to this discussion, but we did outline those at the recommendation of the current city management at that time. And again, that's reflected in the draft document of the master plan. So we have done that exercise. We have not revisited necessarily those numbers for the last year and a half. That's been dormant in that time.
So if you were to translate that into square foot, am I correct in saying that the existing building is about 5,900 square feet? And the proposed new building cost would be 7,000 square feet? So a little bigger, but then with a 7,000 square feet unfinished basement.
But just keep in mind, those are, I mean, we've talked about a lot of things, and I don't want to derail us if we want to talk about that, but what we're mostly concerned about tonight is we've been given direction, and I think we allocated $500,000 in this year's budget in one-time fund balance to rehab the building. And when the cost came in at $660, it was a little high, but we thought, okay, maybe with some contingency money things might work out pretty well for us and we could proceed. Then with this new information, we just realized that if it's $1.2 million to just do it at all, which I think is still a minimum. Of course, we had IT pretty excited about moving over there until most of these revelations came out, and we can bring Ryan in here and ask him what he thinks now. But so that's really where we are. Is we had a budget, we got close to where we thought we could do it, and now we don't believe we can. So is the discussion? Let's allocate 1.2. We're going to save this building. That's what we need to do. If that's the direction, we'll go for that. If the direction is to tear it down, start over because it's a waste of money to put 1.2 into a building when we can get a new one for $2 million, we can go for that as well. If the direction is we don't have enough information yet, we need to wait, we can do that as well. But what we've done so far since the county left that building is nothing and wait. And now we're concerned about the art. We're concerned about the building structurally. Waiting much longer is not advisable, at least from the staff level. So I think there's still a lot of things to work out depending on which road we go down.
With that in mind, I'll revise my question from maybe the most fundamental questions that maybe have already been addressed or thought about. And that is, if you, in trying to meet all those needs, does it change the cost a lot if, for example, you use this space in the existing building to expand IT or to provide more space to keep all the staff in one location, and you move council chambers and have a meeting place over there, the museum, and repurpose that so that you're not dividing staff? I'm not sure that we have cost figures on.
Probably not. I think we think it's a good thing, but you're right. I don't think we could quantify it at this time.
Thank you.
Councilmember Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. I think one of the coolest things that you can do as you travel back east or into the older parts of America or even the older parts of Utah is you can go and find what I call a resto mod, like in the hot rod world, but a building that's a resto mod. And not torn down and recreated to try and look, fake to the old world, but left alone and rehabilitated internally. I firmly stand on saving the library. I don't see any reason why the building needs to come down. I've toured the library too myself, and I'll be honest, I've got mold in my house. That's probably why I have a migraine right now. Who knows? But you know what? There's mold everywhere. If you have the mold testing company come out and they do the air test, they're going to find mold in every one of our homes. I took a look at the building. I cannot find I'm not questioning anyone. The sheetrock that was torn out is gone, but I even had a piece fall out, and I looked at the back and couldn't find serious mold on it. I'm not questioning you, sir, but I'm wondering if mold is a scare. I don't know, but I think mold is easily remediable, especially if it's not growing immensely, engulfing the building, which I do not see any evidence of. The art gallery, as we're talking about the sheeting issue, we can go the art gallery either way. If we're going to sheet the building, we're going to sheet the art gallery. We're not going to sheet everything but that. So either way, that sheetrock's coming out, in my opinion. Let's talk about sheeting, though. You said there are other options than removing the rock facade. My opinion and the opinion of structural engineers and contractors I've spoken to, they have the same opinion as I do. Sheet the inside. The cost to take all that rock off is just astronomical. We could probably find a sealer to put on the inside of the rock, of the masonry rock, and then sheet the inside. I don't even care if you want to use 5/8 sheeting, a couple more bucks per sheet, that's fine. Sheet the inside to grab your shear, and then inject spray foam into the cavity, and then you actually got a pretty decent sound wall for thermal issues, moisture issues, and structural issues. I'm not an engineer, but those are definitely what I would call some valid collective points that I've gathered. So I think there are many ways we can go about this library, and I don't think, in my opinion, I don't see it being 1.2 million. I wonder if the 1.2 million is because it tipped the scale of 50 cents on the dollar, or 50% of the cost of a new one. So perhaps that encourages us to just tear it down and build a new one. I believe the best path is the path of least resistance. Shane, I believe somebody touched on this. Shane and Jake did. But what we don't see is the cost to, in one of the models, to gut this whole room and give it to staff. If we were to give that building to council, you look in here. This is open truss. This is airy. I think people would rather have a wedding in here than have a wedding in an 8.5 to 9 foot. I don't think it's 9. It's like an 8 foot ceiling in there. You just feel cramped. So I don't see that as being feasible. I don't see dumping, $200,000-$300,000 over here on top of that cost in that option to come redo this that functions great already. And I would imagine if we redo this, then we're going to have a lot of wanting to redo that over there too. So I don't think we need to go down those roads. Staff has already, you guys have done a great job with staff putting together a plan that shows that really only the IT is looking to move in there. And I think as we move forward as a city, we talked about it in our power meeting tonight, that we're going to be doing a lot of auto metering. And what does that mean? If our water meters and our power meters are all just done by software, we look at staff needs. That's actually shrinking a little bit of our staff needs as we go on and into the future. We're picking up an attorney, but other than that, I don't know how many more departments we're going to need to keep on building, and the city's nearing build out. I think there's valid cause to save it. I recall that I attended one of the meetings of the library committee, and the historical society member was there, and he led the discussion. And questions were asked of him about the necessary need of doing seismic upgrades, if that was required in code. I recall he said it wasn't, because if you're trying to restore and save an old structure like this, the rules are slightly different. I don't want to be, I'm vaguely quoting what he said, but I know that he said something to the extent, because it got the group really excited, like, wow, we don't need to spend a couple $100,000 on seismic upgrades to bring it to completely current code. So I think that there's a lot of stuff that we can look at. Like I say, the mold doesn't scare me, the shear wall doesn't scare me. We can shear either side of the wall, I guess I did ask that and phrase that in the form of a question, though, and I can see you on the tip of your toes there. What were the other options for the shear that you touched upon?
Well, part of that discussion was to reflect what you just mentioned, was trying to treat it from the inside of the building as opposed to going to the extent of the exterior. That would take a little bit more evaluation to ensure that in doing so that we still have a plan in place and details are appropriate that also, again, control the moisture issue. I guess I want to throw a little caution in the wind that treating the source of these issues is what the ultimate goal is. And again, further evaluation of how we treat and rehab the stone as it is, retool joints, fix the openings as they are. What is the appropriate method, again, to mitigate moisture getting into the cavity itself? If you think about it, when moisture is trying to pass from the interior to the exterior based upon the time of year and the conditions, it requires a certain passageway to breathe. If you don't provide that passageway versus vapor transmission, better term for it, if you don't provide that passageway, then that moisture tends to get stuck in the interior or vice versa. So we want to make sure that in that evaluation of alternate systems, as opposed to, again, removing the facade and treating it that way, that we take great care in making sure that we address the moisture issue itself as we work through those details.
My take is that removing the facade is extremely cost prohibitive, and it will probably hunch us down the line towards just tearing the whole building down. My hunch is we'll find something else to huck in as a wrench, not you, but that's my hunch. I think it's savable, and I think it's also safe to say, I'm not an HVAC expert, but the systems haven't been running fully over there. Nobody's been over there maintaining it, maintaining temperature, maintaining airflows, none of that nature. You would expect, I believe, or I would expect to see some mold in the building regardless. But when I went over there, we could pull back the photo. A lot of what you see in those photos, folks, is just a little bit of rust. Anybody's welcome. It's a public building. You guys can all go and look at your own will. There's really, you might need a microscope to see mold. I don't think it's absolutely prevalent. So, yeah, I'd like to explore more options to see how to save it, but in an economical way. I think once we get humidifiers and dehumidifiers, if needs be, once experts chime in on how to manage that a little bit better without ripping that wall off, because that what is it, over $400,000, $470,000 to rip that rock off and sheet it and put that rock back on. I don't find that necessary. So just personal opinion, and just conjecture to state reasons why I think there is an economical route and a critical path to where we could save that thing without $1.2 million price tag. So,
Thank you. This has been good discussion. I have maybe just one comment, and I'm going to maybe just qualify it a little bit. I've appreciated my experience over the last 10 years, and I've especially appreciated my experience with staff and the council. I'm still serving as mayor for, I think it's 60 more days, and I wouldn't let anyone get away with treating me other than the mayor for 60 more days. Fortunately, I have yet to have that experience, which is great. Was it 50? Thank you. Someone's counting.
who's counting?
58 days, evidently. That being said, if we had something come up or have something on the agenda, I would not think twice about taking action, and I think that should be the case for regardless of the upcoming election. There may be half of us that rotate off. There may be, at a minimum, there will be two of us, but that we could see some changes. The only reason why I'm even bringing this up is because we actually did receive the very presentation that Councilmember Garn asked about at our last meeting in December, and it was long. It was good, but it was long and it was very detailed, and it made a lot of sense. But we didn't do anything after that meeting. We had a change in council membership, and then we eventually had a change in city manager, and we really actually have not visited that again. And so there's that part of me that says I think the council, if you want to take as much action, you can take any action. You can't tonight because this list is a discussion, but you can take as much action as you would like to move forward, to not move forward. But I think the question that Councilmember Garn asked is a very, very important one, and I think there's a whole lot of value in maybe revisiting that discussion that we had nearly 2 years ago and never really got back to. And so the reason why I made my beginning comment is because I think that would provide a lot of value for the city council to decide to maybe answer those questions. I think all of you have asked great questions tonight. I think we've had great comments from the public. I think there's a lot of value in re-educating the council. I do think it would be, no disrespect to myself or Councilmember Snell, I do think it would be a mistake to do that at the second meeting in December again, and then have potentially new council members come on and say, so what was it that because that's exactly what, and it didn't even hit me until you asked that question, you gave the answer. I'm like, that's right, we had a great discussion, but we never revisited it. So one recommendation I guess I would have to the council. This is not necessarily something I'm saying that we need to boot, but I think Councilmember Garn's question needs to be answered, and I think everybody who is on board needs to understand it. And so in order to understand it, I think we need to re-educate, but to re-educate an outgoing council, I also think could potentially be, so I guess my recommendation would be that the council's next step be to do exactly what and revisit what our long-term needs are and go into this project with that thinking. That could mean maintaining the building. I'd love to see the building stay. So maybe that means maintaining the building and having a long-term plan for something else somewhere when the time is right. But I think understanding the question you raised, Mr. Garn, is very important. So I would recommend that the council maybe ask for an update and a re-education in January, and then revisit all of the recommendations based on a clear understanding of what the city's long-term needs are. But that's just a recommendation.
I think that's a reasonable recommendation, Mayor. Are you looking for a motion on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great motion.
Can we say so moved?
Just because it was mine.
I would actually make that motion that JRCA revisit their presentation on our long-term needs, including the old library building, so that the new council and new mayor come January can have a full education, as well as the community, a full education on and a direction, and come up with a direction going forward. I think that makes sense. Anyway, that's my motion, if that's clear enough.
I'll go ahead and second that.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Councilmember Snell and a second by Councilmember Lee as outlined. I got to go back to our new rules because I'm still used to the old ones. Any
5 minutes for.
Yeah, each of you have, well, actually, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. I don't necessarily need to give everybody 5 minutes to talk. If I have a pretty good feeling that you are going to all vote in favor, then that becomes not a necessary step. If one of you say, I would like to exercise my option for 5 minutes, then we'll give it to each of you. So I'm going to ask, just in general, does anyone want to take their time? Because if not, we'll call for a vote.
I just have one question.
Okay,
Quick.
we'll start with Councilmember Lee. You each have 5 minutes.
Sorry. The money that we've put aside for this, as far as if we wait and then we decide we can't get it done within this fiscal year, can that money be put into a fund that will still go towards the building of that? What would that do to us?
Absolutely. If it's not used, it'll just remain in the general fund. So we could allocate it next year and revisit adding to it or subtracting from it too.
Councilmember Adams?
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mayor.
You're next.
Just 2 quick points. I mean, one thing I forgot to raise is in the plan to give that building to city council, there was also city council offices in that. That's just mere point of record. I'd like to state that. I think that's just unnecessary. I don't think we need them. I'd rather give them to staff. And then as far as, it'd be great to get third-party opinions from contractors, mold contractors, general contractors, that kind of stuff, and maybe get some real-world estimates on what we're looking at here. So I think that'd be beneficial.
Can I respond to that question?
Boss is over there.
Sure. You're part of his 5 minutes if he wants to give you his time.
I'll make mine brief so you can finish your 5 minutes. I would agree with that assessment from a cost observation standpoint. Again, my estimate is from a cost estimator that we use frequently, and again, using current market conditions and his history and knowledge. I rely on him for the guidance in the cost estimating department. So it is not unrealistic to take the time to invite some general contractors and other individuals into the space to get a further understanding of our thoughts of the current remodel plan. Also discuss further the remedies that we've put forth, and again look at other alternatives when related to the exterior wall cavity. So those are all very valid points, and I would highly recommend that we take some time to do that.
Anything else, Councilmember Adams? Councilmember Garn? Councilmember Page?
No, we're fine.
All right. Oh, Councilmember Sam?
Well, yeah, don't forget about me.
You made the motion. So.
Yeah, having made the motion that I made, I recognize fully that this council's, if it votes forward, is about to, quote unquote, kick the can a couple of months down the road. But I think that I'm not a huge fan of kicking the can on issues per se, but I think it's important. This is an important discussion, especially because a new council will be here in a couple of months and 58 days. And they will have that opportunity, I think, and the responsibility to make the decision and the determination of what to do going forward. You know, and I've said it before, so I'll keep my comments brief. I mean, that old library building, I remember as a very young child, my mom taking me in to, you know, check out books and whatnot when there was only a very small portion of that building that was dedicated to the library. So I've been in that building many times throughout my life, and I recognize that that's it's an old building in Kaysville. It's one of those that's been there. I personally don't have the same nostalgic response to the building itself. I think the value of that building is especially what's in that building. The LeConte Stewart Gallery is priceless. And I think having a dedicated space in that or in a new building for a museum is terrific. I agree and would say that I mean, Davis High was a much older building and probably much more historical building when it was torn down and replaced after 90 years being in its location. Buildings outlast their usefulness for the most part. And I think hopefully the future council will take that into consideration as well as all the other factors, trying to make sure that I am for preserving heritage as well, but I don't think we should preserve the building. I don't think is what is necessarily the heritage of that. So enough said. Thank you.
All right, so with that, we have a motion and a second as outlined. We'll go ahead and actually, I just want to add one thing to what you mentioned. I don't consider this kicking the can personally. I think what's different on this issue to me was the comment that Councilmember Garn made about I don't understand what our needs are. And if this council had a full knowledge and understanding of what the need was, then I would not be in favor of waiting to January. I'd say if you have the information you need and you have the understanding, I would not be suggesting what I'm suggesting right now. So I thought I would just point that out. So Councilmember Garn. Vote, yeah or nay?
Oh, aye.
Yeah, thank you.
Aye.
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 Thank you. The voting is unanimous.